Sure. Welcome to the Career Wanderlust podcast, your compass for new career horizons. Today, we are talking with Natalie Maguire. Natalie is a public relations professional with experience in industries ranging from the nuclear energy sector to both B2C and B2B technologies. She was named as one of PR News's top women in PR in-house innovators category in 2023. Currently, Natalie is SVP of Global Communications at Giphy, where she oversees the company's external and internal facing communications, including media relations, crisis management, executive thought leadership, and brand reputation. Prior to Giphy, Natalie managed global communications at the ad tech company Tapad, and she has years of agency experience advising a wide variety of clients such as Hewlett Packard, Pepsi, MasterCard, and many more. I'm just excited to learn more. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us on the Career Wanderlist podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. I mean, you have excelled in your career. I mean, really, you've been advancing through the ranks quickly too. Can you tell me a little bit about piece of advice or a belief or something that you've found has really helped you the most throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one that I've really learned throughout my career, which is now spans about 14 years in PR specifically. And something, you mentioned in the intro, I've worked in a variety of industries. I've got my start actually doing PR for nuclear energy companies. I'm doing crisis communications on the energy sector and also working a little bit on the Hill, doing some grassroots efforts to working with tech startups to massive corporations like Hewlett Packard. And now I do what I affectionately call PR for gifts, which sounds made up, but as you can see is a real job. Um, but something I've really learned to be true and I really remind myself about often is the advice to ask questions that lead to solutions. This is one I've found because no matter the circumstance, I mentioned I've been in a lot of different situations. When I first started my career, it was around the time that the Fukushima power plant was hit by a tsunami in Japan, which is a big nuclear energy crisis. So I navigated that. I've done massive product launches for companies. And throughout all of it, I've learned that one skill you can really bring that is universal is that ability to ask questions that lead to solutions. So asking, knowing in these circumstances, how do I get to the solution that needs to happen? What questions do I have to ask or can I inspire other people to ask to get us where we need to be? Because, we've all been there where sometimes there's questions for the sake of questions or questions that only lead to more questions. And then you go down this rabbit trail of, wait, like what were we trying to solve in the first
Mhm.
place? What was the goal of this conversation? So having been in those shoes and admittedly like being guilty of doing those things, I've learned and the advice I would give to anyone, comms or not, is learning and establishing that skill set of, hey, how do I get to the solution? How am I the person who then helps ask the questions to get there? And I think it can also help you in any circumstance, especially if you're dealing with, so again, like working in energy to B2B tech, often taking very complicated or technical issues, we'll say, and trying to boil it down into something that's straightforward. It helps you there too, because you can kind of look at a situation and say, okay, what are the questions that will get us to where we need to be to explain this at a mass scale, right? Because you don't have the luxury of sending a 2 to 3 page like white paper
Mhm.
about the issue. And if I may go on just a little bit longer about it, again, just the skill set of learning how to ask questions that lead to solutions. I just want to give some practical advice of kind of how I've seen it work out in my career is
Yes, because this
yeah.
is really powerful. And so I would love an example because I think this is something that everyone can use regardless of your career and really in life in general too.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
for this people. Also, what I've seen is, early on in PR, I got my start in energy. I wasn't sure, do I want to be in this field? But then I kind of felt like maybe I have to because I've done now 3 years in it. And then I went to tech and I was like, okay, I really like tech, but do I want to stay in tech? I kind of felt this like overwhelming sense of, do I have to just stay in a thing because this is what I've now studied or what I've gotten my start in? And I think if you can master a skill like this, and what I learned is short story, the answer is no. Because if you can excel in almost like soft skills or universal skills like this, like you can be an expert no matter what room you're in, right? So if you're
Mhm.
the person that people will think of when They have a really complicated issue. And this is what I've seen really work for me in my career is establishing myself as the person who can help get to solutions quickly. I've been brought into projects again, like engineering things, stuff that's like not even falls within the comms realm, but people are like, well, we need someone who's going to help us get to where we need to be. That will get you, it'll open doors that you don't think exist. So if you kind of position yourself as not, you don't have to be expert in a specific area, which again is still helpful, right? You can be an
Hmm.
expertise, tech or energy. But if you have something like this, it will open doors that aren't just limited to that one place. So I
Correct.
felt like it's really been useful to me. And I'm actually quite a shy person also. People are always surprised. They're like, what? They're like, no, I'm actually quite introverted. I'm not always a person who will like volunteer to speak up. That's something I really had to work through in my career and getting to where I am and learning this and realizing, okay, if I can just focus kind of my anxiety and my anxiousness about what I'm going to say into like, well, what can I ask to get us closer to where we need to be? It's also helped me in that way of kind
Hmm.
of finding my own voice and owning that in any room.
This is, I mean, it's really great advice because the questions, the right questions lead us to the right answers. And it is a talent asking the right kind of questions. So this is very powerful advice, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who might be thinking, really great advice, but how do I ask that kind of a question? Do you have any examples of what a question would look like that's geared towards a solution?
Yeah, so one, I'll start with advice of kind of learning where I feel like I really learned it was honestly just watching a lot of interviews, media interviews for one, reading a lot. Kind of the way journalists tell stories, kind of opened my eyes to, okay, like this is what I can bring into the room, right? Because for them, it's not always like, okay, I'm finding a solution to a problem, but I'm trying to tell a specific story. And how do I get there in a way that's compelling, that captivates my audience? Can that technique and so when I would sit in on interviews being on the comm side, right, and, like, hearing them question my spokespeople, I was like, "Oh, like, I can learn from this," not in that
Mhm.
I'm gonna be interviewing people on the journalism side, but I am in the room where I can ask questions. I think one is always that I've found to be very helpful, and it sounds very obvious, but I found in situations, well, let's say you're in a project kickoff or there's some big thing that's happening. I'll use an example of a crisis because that's where
Mhm.
I thrive in a crisis, I say. I feel like I'm always have to knock on wood after say that because something's gonna come up. Well, to be like, there's a crisis happening in your company, you're trying to figure out, like, what's the statement. It for me, it's always starting with, if we had to look back, like, what do we hope we accomplish? Like, what's so let's say it's, think of a specific crisis, for example, but in the energy sector. So, like, let's say there's something that happened. It's what do we hope like our key audience takes away from this? That can be one example of like the outcome you want. Or it's what do we hope our employees take out of this is the another outcome. From a comm side specifically, it's kind of looking at like who your audience is, how are you gonna get the desired message to them? And that's, like, one question you can ask it, is even starting with, "Who is my audience? Who am I trying to reach?" It's I know that's kind of a very broad sense, but it's starting there. It's almost thinking, like, backwards, thinking about where you hope this goes, and then the questions that kind of, like, take you back to where you start. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
very complicated.
definitely. Yes. And
Mhm.
you mentioned, you mentioned being an introvert and shy.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of the aspects of this job require you to kind of come out of that. So I was just curious, was there anything that really helped you deal with that? Or I mean, just kind of help make you feel a little more comfortable in these types of situations for people who also are introverted and shy in dealing with this.
Yeah, I mean, this was one in terms of focusing my energy of like, okay, I want to just bring good questions, these solutions. The other one is that this was rather blunt advice I got early in my career, which I was telling someone that it was a manager of mine that I was like nervous, I just felt like, what if I say something wrong and like people think I'm dumb? And I remember her just straight up telling me, she's like, listen, nobody cares. She's like, you care so much more about the way you look than anyone else. And it like, at first I was like, oh, rude. But like, she was so right. It's so true, right? Because I even think back to meetings I'm in and what people say. And like, maybe sometimes someone will say something and I'm like, oh, but I immediately move past it, right? Like you don't people aren't thinking as hard about you as you are. Like, and I know that about myself. I'm my own worst critic and the harshest critic. But that did actually, like, it woke me up a little bit, and I was like, "Okay." And embracing that did help me to help again with this, and a lot of great mentors also in my career, find that voice and feel definitely that confidence to be able to speak up in these rooms, yeah.
I
And
love it.
don't they don't think about it.
No, they don't. Great advice. I mean, and it's just something that we need to be consistently reminded of, right? You know?
Yeah, that is. I'm like, I still remind myself of that. I mean, to
Oh,
be honest, I still find myself in situations where I have an idea. I'm like, well, people think it's like no one's gonna just say it.
yeah. We all have that loud
Okay.
voice in our head, and we have to remind ourselves how to move past that loud voice. So,
Yeah, and that
yeah.
I think it was a Sheryl Sandberg book where she talks about the seat at the table. It's like if you're in the room, you have the seat at the table. You're here for a reason, and owning that reason and knowing that if I'm here to like for a reason. I'm going to share my expertise and I'm going to share my ideas. And again, kind of reminding myself that like people are thinking about it as hard as I think they are, but owning that and taking the opportunity to be your own best advocate too, I think is
Okay.
huge.
Oh, definitely. Thank you for that. Well,
Yeah.
I would love a story. I love stories. I just find that there's so much you can learn from a story. Is there something that happened to you in your own career that turned out to be an impactful lesson? Something that you really learned from that by just sharing, other people might be able to learn something too.
Yeah, so this is a mistake I made, which hopefully will also make you better about themselves and feel a little more confident, and know that your career can be adaptable and change if you take the lessons as you go.
Mhm.
So this was about gosh now 10 years ago. I was still pretty new to this role, and I was working with a tech client. And I had just booked them a really exciting speaking opportunity. I was so pumped because I was like, I'm coming in, I'm booking speaking ops. It's great. I was so excited. So a few days before, I'm prepping all the final details in this document, writing the messaging, and I realized I had put the wrong date in the executive's calendar. So I put the calendar hold for the day before the event. And so I realized the mistake and I was like, oh no. And so I told him the mistake and he's like, I can't make it anymore. Like I booked that day. I can't do this opportunity. Completely my fault. Like, oh, I could still like feel my stomach.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was so embarrassed. And the first thing I did is kind of going back to like the solutions focused mindset is it's like, okay, the way to go forward is I came up with like 2 to 3 ideas of it, how we could solve this. And then I went to my manager and I told her I made a mistake, a big mistake. I put the wrong date. He's not available. I have these 3 ideas I think we could do to help. And one of them was to find a different executive to step in. I already checked the calendar. I think they're free. And this is where the lesson comes in is that she responded so calmly. Instead of being irritated or disappointed, she listened to my whole spiel. And then instead of being like, how did you do that? Or like, what? She didn't show any. She just said, okay, solutions, that one, let's go there. And so she helped me resolve it. We moved on the solution. It was all good. The lesson for me was really her response, not even with anything I did, but it was twofold. It's that, well, first, attention to detail always, right? I've never made that mistake again. I now have so much like anytime I have an exec interview or speaking of, I like look at that calendar invite multiple times. But also for the lesson really was leading with kindness, following with solutions. Is kind of how I boil it down because seeing how she reacted, it made me obviously I was mortified and I learned from that in the way of like, okay, don't make a mistake again. But it taught me so much how to be a leader in the workplace and to be a leader in any setting, which is people make mistakes. We're all guilty of it. We make mistakes. Our teammates will make mistakes. People who report to us, people we
Mhm.
answer to will make mistakes. And if you want to motivate people to learn from them, to find solutions, to to make the most of it and use it as a lesson, start with kindness, take it, and then help them find the solution. Like be an enabler in that direction instead of just, or you could I very easily could have been shut down or made to feel bad.
Yeah.
And instead, I feel very empowered to learn from it, to offer a solution, and to grow from it. And so that to me was something that, again, it's not even just specific to comms, but I think any leadership role is being someone that your team feels comfortable they can admit their mistakes to, but also learn from it. It's a tough line to toe, but she did it so marvelously and something I think about a lot, especially
Absolutely.
now in more of a leadership position for sure.
No, that's how you grow thriving, empowered teams is exactly that.
Yeah,
And it's a great example of strong leadership, but it is also a great example of how you personally deal with a mistake. And I want to applaud you for that
for sure.
because not everybody does that. I mean, a big majority of people, when a mistake happens, they will take that mistake directly to the manager, like, oh my gosh, I made this mistake. What
Right.
do we do? But instead, you sat with that mistake first. You thought about it. Okay, what can I learn? How can I change this? What's the solution? What are some possibilities for me or for this process? You came up with three solutions and you packaged all of that before you went and talked to your manager. And that was very powerful. That's something that's an amazing lesson right there that everyone can take away from is you can take that little bit of a time when you do make a mistake, because you're right, we all make mistakes. It's
Yeah.
happen. So,
And I
when you
remember
do,
her feedback, we do. I mean, still to this day, but I remember her specific feedback even after it all went down was she just said, she thanked me. She said, "Thank you for bringing this right away." She said, "There's people who also wouldn't admit it, right? They'd be like, oh,
mhm,
something got mixed up or the organizers did something."
right.
And so it was knowing that this was a safe space to bring that up, but also feeling also, I think she could also see in my face that like I already was like, kicking myself enough that she was like, "I don't have to say anything." Like, clearly there was already a vibe of like, "I can't believe I did this."
Yeah.
Um, for now, I definitely try to bring that with me of and what I tell other people at my company is kind of the way I lead is I don't dwell on the mistake. I focus on the solution and ultimately just try to be kind because
Mhm.
you also just never know the
Yeah,
kind of day someone's having. And I
exactly.
think that goes a long way
And
personally.
again, this is all amazing advice, not only for your career, but for your life.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? So, well, now as far as career goes, I mean, you really have I mentioned this earlier, you have moved up the ranks very quickly. I mean, you've had a successful career all the way through. And I feel like you might have some gems in there for people to learn from. Is there anything that you feel has helped you the most in getting your advancements, your promotions, or landing the job?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a combination of adaptability and what's the other word? And being resilient. I think the two, because especially in a communications role, you might have an idea of what you signed up for, right? And so I'll use an example of like a Giphy, for example. I love GIFs. I love Giphy. When I got the job opportunity, I was so excited because I use them in Slack all the time. I use the stickers on Instagram. I'm an older millennial. It speaks my language. And so I was so excited. And so I kind of knew what I'm getting into in terms of doing press for gift launches, doing cool partner activations. But something, you never know what's going to happen at a company. And actually in 2020, right after COVID hit, the world's changing quickly. We were bought by Meta. This was May 2020. And then shortly after that, the Competition Markets Authority out of the UK launched an investigation into the acquisition, antitrust. That went on for a couple of years. And then we were sold to Shutterstock actually just last year. So, in the course of basically 3 years, I've been now at two different parent companies, went through a regulatory investigation, and never did I think this would be part of my journey at Giphy, right? But I think what really helped me just with the situation, but also kind of opportunities to advance in the ranks is not seeing change so much as a challenge, or not challenge is the wrong word, as an opponent, but as an opportunity. And so I think adaptability is so key with these things and showing leadership that you can take on more. Because if you can show, let's say, like, oh, you're bought by one company, regulatory, bought by another, and that through each of these things, you're kind of faced with, all right, this was how we were before, this is how we are now, how can I take that new situation and use it to Giphy's advantage? How can I make the most of this? How can I, again, like provide solutions to a very new environment? So I think again, kind of seeing change as an opportunity to improve and to think of new creative ways to do your job and to promote your company and being resilient through all of it and kind of showing that, yeah, whatever you throw at me, I'll take it head on. I will find new ideas. I will kind of think about I think sometimes we get in this trap of when change is presented to us of thinking, okay, how can I make what was working fit into this new scenario? but instead kind of flipping the script and looking at it as, okay, I have this change. How do I make the most of it? How do I take, this new opportunity and then bring my company into it as opposed to the other way around? Because you can't always control the factors on the outside, but you can usually control more of what's happening internally. And so I do think kind of those two things, those two traits, I think for anyone learning to grow their career, if you can prove your adaptability, your resilience, especially during tough times, it will open doors and it will show the people at a leadership level. They'll want to give you more because they will know that they can trust you with it and that you'll kind of like you'll keep working, you'll keep that mindset and stay adaptable even when sometimes they're not sure what to do. And so I think that for me has been probably the biggest things I've leaned into.
So good. I mean, really so good. This is how you thrive in life, right? Adapting this type of mindset and ability to
Yeah.
do that with change. It's really, really powerful. And I mean, and I've seen this overall in life in general, right? It's that,
Yeah.
and you said some key things there. It's that accepting. Okay, so these things change. This change just happened, and it's accepting like, okay, this is where I am now, and then asking yourself the right questions, or, asking yourself the right questions. Okay, how do I turn this
Yeah.
in? How do I make this an advantage? How do I, and all when you do that, that is how you thrive and keep growing. So thank you for sharing that because it really is a powerful mindset shift that anyone can adopt right now if they haven't already.
Yeah, and it's something, from personal experience, I moved 8 times before I graduated high school. So it's something, I resisted those changes every step of the way. But it's funny now I talk to my parents about it and I'm like, I think it taught me so much I didn't even realize it was teaching me because especially then going into the workforce and a career in communications and especially crisis communication, I'm like, these changes happen and I go with it. I think
Yeah.
there is kind of that learned, but it's a learned thing. Like it takes practice. Although here I am bragging about it and I will say that my toddler has challenged that more than, like, anything I've ever had. Like, he really is like, "Well, so my favorite food's cheese." 10 minutes later, it's blackberries, and I'm like, "I got dropped every half hour." My office is not
Absolutely.
Thomas the Tank Engine Memorial, so, it changes all the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So funny. That's really funny. Well, I would love to know, Natalie, because I'm really passionate about feeding your mind in a proactive way because we're constantly being fed
Yeah.
whatever is just out there. So, is there anything that you have read or watched or listened to that's had a positive impact on you that could positively impact others as well?
Yeah, so the thing for me, it's my friends know this about me. I'm a bit of a tree hugger. It's National Geographic is the one I love reading it. I love the photographs, I love the writing, and I give this example as a positive impact because it's the thing, and it's not even limited to just that. I follow some conservationists on Instagram too. Paul Nicklin's one of my favorites. He does a lot with ocean conservation. Sea Legacy is their organization. Recommend looking it up. But it reminds, and this is gonna sound cheesy. It just reminds me that the world is so much bigger. I think I care about my job a lot. I care about what I do. I care about my company, my employees, my team. I care about doing well, succeeding, very type A in that way. But it's been positive for me to lean into that interest in that part of my life. And because it reminds me how much bigger the world is, it reminds me how much is outside that I can't control that is beautiful and mysterious. And it's again, a little cheesy, but it does, it's such a positive impact on my mental state. I
I love
find
it.
that by reading that publication in particular, just learning more about conservation efforts, it's so inspiring too. And it helps me, it pulls me out. In, gifts, they're fun. They're great. I love them. But like also we're like nothing without this big beautiful globe that we sit on. And so I think it
Absolutely.
helps remind me kind of like what the bigger picture is,
I love it.
and it's a good reset button for my
Yeah.
brain.
I
I would
love it. It's a good
Yeah.
reminder too. I haven't actually myself because I'm a big reader. I haven't looked at them in a while. I'm gonna go check them out. Thank you.
I guess this is my way of saying I like picture books,
Yeah.
but Because they're
Well,
not
I
going to
just
push
love
back
learning about the world in
forward.
general. So, I'm going to go follow them on Instagram.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
they're great.
on
They're
Facebook.
they're
Yeah.
photographers. Yeah, they're really, really impressive the work they do. So I always,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, this has been great. Thank you so much, Natalie. But before you go, one last question, just because I love to know. We all have superpowers we're born with, but we also develop them over time. Is there a superpower that you have developed over time that you have found benefits you? And how does it benefit you?
My non-serious answer is that I like to think I can use as much cheese as I want despite being lactose intolerant. But my doctor would probably disagree. That's not a superpower. That's just being stubborn. Um, but I'm gonna keep, I guess, hitting this nail on the head. It's the adaptability piece.
Mhm.
Serious, I think, is the superpower I've developed because it has taken time. I mentioned I moved a lot as a
Yeah.
kid, and so that all kind of, I think, shaped. We'll call it the superpower. That I'm now in my late 30s, and so it takes time, but it's because of this. I think like I said, it's open doors. And I find that adaptability is really just another form of problem solving. And so I think it's just a cool
Yeah.
thing that I've really leaned into in career and life and tried to hone because, you can't change every factor of your life. You don't know what things are going to present themselves that completely turn a situation on its head. But if you can assess a new situation and adapt to succeed, I just think it's something I like to try to bring wherever I am. And, one of my hobbies actually is mountain climbing. I love it. It's a favorite. I mentioned nature, but I think that's why it's like one of those things that it forces you. Like the weather can change in a dime. That depending on what
Mhm.
elevation you're at, you have to completely change the way that you breathe, the way that you like resource your energy, and so anything like that, I think that it kind of inspires me to stay adaptable, to think about how I change a situation and succeed is a cool challenge to me.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah.
if I have to sit and
But I
pick
love
a
your
superpower.
practicing too, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Adaptability for sure
Yeah.
is one I think I've been really leaning into lately, especially as I get older.
Well, you know what? It's a powerful one. Everyone, that is something that we should all lean more into adaptability. We all need it in life. It's how we thrive. So I think it's perfect. It's a perfect, it's an amazing superpower to have. and
I
I'm,
mean, I hope so. Yeah.
we, it is not one that we all have. I can tell you that.
Well, that's the thing, it
It's
takes
needed.
practice, right?
Yes.
Like, it
Yeah.
does. That's something that I wouldn't even know if it came naturally to me or if it was just my circumstances that kind of forced me to really embrace it and take it on, but either way, I'm grateful for it,
Yeah.
'cause I've kind of looking outward in, it's like, "Oh, yeah, this is actually quite useful," and it's in my career every day, and so, yeah, I'm grateful, we'll put
Yeah.
it that way.
That's great. Now, Natalie, this has been such a wonderful talk. And thank you so much for joining me on the Career Wonderlist podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us on the Career Wanderlust podcast. If you find value in learning from others, give us a like and subscribe. If you're looking to grow your communications, marketing, public relations, or sales and biz dev team with the best talent and quickly, check us out at paradigmstaffing.com and submit a request. We are wishing you a most successful and fulfilling career. Until next time.